Right, so I think I'm about done wrapping up 2020, and I think it's time to move on now to the new year ahead of us that we are in right now, 2021, and I'll start with this video today, telling you guys the top 5 UFC champions that are most likely to lose their belt in 2021. I'm going to start at number 5, end with number 1, and we'll figure out who is the most likely to lose their belt in 2021 at the end of this video. But starting with number 5 on my list, Deiveson Figueiredo against Brandon Moreno in their rematch. Let's not waste any more time and get straight into it. Figueiredo versus Moreno 2 is a very, very competitive rematch. I do believe that Deiveson is going to get the job done against Brandon Moreno. I think the 3-week turnaround for a guy who's as massive as Deiveson Figueiredo is in that flyweight division is never going to be a good thing. Plus, he was hospitalized the night before the fight, so I think the only advantage gained is going to be in Deiveson Figueiredo's favor when they do have that rematch with more time to prepare for each other. But Brandon Moreno also had a tough fight with Brandon Royval 3 weeks before his fight with Deiveson Figueiredo. Who knows if he took some injuries into the fight against Figueiredo himself? That's a very big question to ask. I think Brandon Moreno has a real legit chance at beating Deiveson Figueiredo in 2021. I believe that Figueiredo will get the job done against Brandon Moreno because I feel like Deiveson Figueiredo, even though he's a bit older, which could favor again, which is the reason why he's on the top 5 here, Brandon Moreno's the younger guy, going to evolve a little bit more in between fights, but I feel like Deiveson Figueiredo has made so many improvements in his game over the past year. When you look at the start of his 2019 year, when he was fighting guys like Alejandro Pantoja, and other fights that he had in the division were a little bit iffy, and he had his Hussier Formiga loss as well, and it looked a little bit weird there. He was injured, but still looked a little bit off. Didn't look like he was going to be this dominant champion that reigned for a long time. And after the Joseph Benavidez performance, it's hard to doubt that he's improving massively each and every fight. And in a submission against Alex Perez, amazing as well. I think he's entered a second Brazilian prime, much along the likes of Glover Teixeira and Charles Oliveira doing the same thing right now. So I think Figueiredo wins against Moreno in 2021, but I'm open to an upset. So he's number 5 on my list. Moving on to number 4. There are many competitive title fights this year, and Jan's defense against Aljamain Sterling is going to be a very, very interesting one. Petr Yan against Aljamain Sterling. I expect this to happen at UFC 258 in February. I think that's when it's going to happen. We'll see if they can get it finalized. I hope they do. I think that Yan is going to beat Aljamain Sterling, but I don't know. I think this is kind of 50-50 in all honesty. Sometimes I lean Yan. I seem to lean Petr Yan a little bit more. And I feel like I'm leaning even more towards Petr Yan somewhat recently now that Aldo has bounced back against Marlon Vera and looked really good there. I think if Aldo really got beaten by Vera the same way that Yan beat him, by Vera coming on strong in the later rounds, it would maybe diminish Petr Yan's performance a little bit, but I feel like Yan's performance looks even better now that we've seen that Aldo's still got it and he's still competing with the best of the bantamweight division, and now he's going to bounce back looking for a title shot of his own soon. Hopefully Aldo gets there. I mean, it would be a good thing to see a veteran like that get back towards a belt one last time, but Petr Yan against Aljamain Sterling is a dangerous matchup because Aljamain Sterling, in my opinion, you can argue he fought better competition than Yan leading up to this title shot. You could argue, in all honesty, that Aljamain Sterling is kind of the best 135-pounder in the world because Jose Aldo's a good win, don't get me wrong, but he had that really close fight with Marlon Moraes, and then Aljamain Sterling beat Corey Sandhagen, who didn't have a close fight with Marlon Moraes whatsoever, and that's an argument to be made. And you look at Aljo's performance against Jimmy Rivera, and I know that they fought him differently, but Aljamain Sterling did a little bit of a better job against Jimmy Rivera. I feel like Yan played Rivera at his own game, so it's a little bit more impressive what Yan did. But at the same time, Aljamain Sterling's got some really good wins in that bantamweight division against tough contenders. I think Yan is going to get the job done against him, but I'm open to a swaying over these next couple of months before they fight, because I'm going to look back at some of Aljamain Sterling's performances that he's had against top guys in the division and see what he can do. But Yan is very dangerous. He's got crazy power. I think the grappling we've seen from Yan, we've never seen a weakness in his grappling so far, and I think the grappling that he showed dominantly against guys like Jose Aldo and the top control that he has shown, and also just the takedowns that he throws in there just carelessly for no reason, like he'll do some stuff against Uriah Faber, who is not an easy guy to take down the way Yan was doing against him. And I know that he had Faber hurt, but the way he was cross-sweeping and just dragging Faber over the top of him to the ground, it was crazy to watch Yan do that to someone, so I assume his grappling is going to be good. I also don't believe that Aljamain Sterling wins that Corey Sandhagen fight the same way 10 times in a row. I don't think he wins it the same way 2 times in a row, in all honesty, or 1.5 times in a row. I don't see Aljamain Sterling doing that to Corey Sandhagen more than 1 out of 10 times that they fight each other, but at the same time, you could take it as a warning sign, and this might be the red flag that we look back on, that maybe Aljo's going to go out there and just reach this new level in his grappling game in his career and just destroy Petr Yan. But I think Yan gets it done, but that's number 4 on my list. Aljo's a very, very worthy contender. Moving on to number 3 on my list. Kamaru Usman defending against Gilbert Burns in 2021. I do believe that Burns is going to beat Kamaru Usman. I'm a huge fan of Burns. Okay, I was not a believer before the Woodley fight. I believe I was a believer leading into the Maia fight. I picked Burns to win that one. I'm very sure I picked Burns to pick that one. I'm sure someone will go back and check and leave it in the comments if I didn't. But still, I think I picked against Burns in the Woodley fight because I thought Woodley was going to come back with a vengeance. But the way that Gilbert Burns shut down Tyron Woodley, almost the most impressive out of anyone, including Covington and Usman. I know Usman controlled Woodley a little bit better in the grappling situations, and then Covington actually finished Woodley. But I feel like Gilbert Burns, when you look at all aspects of the Woodley fights that have been had, of all of Woodley's losses over the past couple of... It feels weird to say this now. I'm still not used to saying Woodley on this loss streak because he was a champion for so long, but it seems like he's fallen off. But Gilbert Burns' performance against Tyron Woodley made Kamaru Usman's performance against Tyron Woodley look kind of average. And that is weird because Usman's performance against Woodley when it first happened was like, this is crazy, no one's ever done this. And then Burns does the exact same thing the next fight, and it's kind of like, oh my god, well maybe everyone else is murderers as well, who knows. Burns, I believe, is going to get the job done against Usman. I was a little bit on the edge at first. I see this as a 50-50 fight on paper, but I feel like with Kamaru Usman breaking his nose twice in a row and suspending this fight because of it twice now, that is a huge factor to take into consideration. Kamaru Usman broke his nose in the Jorge Masvidal fight, was going to fight Gilbert Burns, but decided against it so he could recover his nose fully. Then they were going to make the fight with Gilbert Burns anyway, and then he, I guess, re-breaks his nose, or again, does something to his nose and doesn't want to risk it breaking again or something, but that seems to be a real problem for him right now, and I think that kind of gives Gilbert Burns the edge, because I don't want a guy worrying about his nose caving in when they're standing in front of Gilbert Burns, who has better jiu-jitsu than Usman, better striking than Usman, I'd say better KO power than Usman as well, faster than Usman. The only difference maker in the fight, in my opinion, is Usman is a giant man with a giant head and a giant upper body. The legs are quite skinny, but the giant upper body strength that he has could be enough to just manhandle Burns enough in the fight. But I feel like with Usman trying to manhandle Burns, when Usman gets everyone else to the ground, that's terrible for them. But with Burns, if he's being held up against a cage by Usman, everyone else against the cage against Usman wants to get back to the feet and try and do what they can at range. But Burns is going to be like, oh, you want to hold me against the cage? Fine, I'll pull guard. I'll just go down with you and we'll see what happens once we hit the ground. I feel like Burns is the first guy to not have to worry. He's kind of like the Tony Ferguson of the... Well, again, with all of these old guys falling off recently, I can't even say the Tony Ferguson because he's actually a top contender. So, he's like the 2016-17... He's like the 2018 Tony Ferguson of the welterweight division, whereas there's no real way and there's no real place to take him to make him look bad, and he seems to be comfortable in all areas. Now, Usman might just be too big and too strong for him, but I feel like Burns is going to get the upset against Usman in 2021. Of course, I'm going to look into it a little bit deeper, but I'm leaning Burns right now, so that's number 3 on my list. Moving on to number 2 on my list of people that are going to lose their belts in 2021. It's Jan Blachowicz against Israel Adesanya. It hurts me to say this because I feel like the end of 2020 and the start of 2021 is just going to be everyone just tearing Jan Blachowicz to shreds over how he's going to lose to Israel Adesanya and he's a paper champ, and obviously John Jones has put out his messages about Jan Blachowicz as well, and it feels like there's a bit of a shadow over the light heavyweight division, but I feel like Jan Blachowicz is a really huge threat to Israel Adesanya. I think Usman Burns was 50-50 before I keep hearing about the nose break and Usman not in the gym like Burns is, and I feel like Burns is going to get the advantage. But Jan Blachowicz against Israel Adesanya, I think Adesanya's going to beat him. Okay, I just really do, and I feel like Adesanya sort of reached this new level in his career. Seems to be really weirdly at the same time that he grew that breast at the age of 30 as a male. That he reached this new level in his career where he just seems to be lighting people up and everyone's fearing his power that Tavares walked through for 5 rounds. But you know, this new Israel Adesanya with his breast, I feel like he's a little bit of a problem for the light heavyweights right now, and it seems like now we have to take into consideration Israel Adesanya's one-punch knockout power, and Jan Blachowicz has been TKO'd by guys like Thiago Santos, and the reason why I think Adesanya beats him is the reason why he was TKO'd against Thiago Santos. When Jan Blachowicz is in control, he's good. And the legendary Borges power can come out in full force and he'll land it straight on your chin when he has your respect. What Thiago Santos did to Jan Blachowicz was get ahead early, so Blachowicz can't just cruise and wait for counter shots like he usually does. Santos got ahead early in the striking game at range, scored more points than Jan Blachowicz, and it left Jan Blachowicz wanting to go after Thiago Santos, and when he does that, he gets quite reckless because he goes forward, and when he does go forward, he throws a lot of combinations moving forward. I think that Adesanya can time him much like Santos did in the middle of those combinations rushing forward, and I think Adesanya can also outstrike Blachowicz at range the same way Santos did, and then lead Jan Blachowicz to get a little bit over-aggressive in the later rounds, looking for the finish against Adesanya or looking for a sway of momentum against Adesanya to get the rounds back in his favour, and I think that's when Adesanya is going to catch him on the chin, coming forward. Gaino Sanya reigns supreme. He's hit a new level in his career. It's very obvious to see, but I feel like Jan Blachowicz is going to lose in 2021. I do understand the risk that Jan Blachowicz presents to Israel Adesanya because a lot of people aren't really taking into consideration the grappling of Jan Blachowicz here. He is a huge man. Jan Blachowicz is a giant's man. And I first realised that when I saw Luke Rockhold move up to middleweight and he didn't look like that much bigger than Jan Blachowicz, because Jan Blachowicz isn't the tallest guy in the world, but there's one thing he is wide. He is so wide. It's very, very strange to see his broadness that he has to him in that division, and it makes him very strong in the grappling situations. You saw guys like Corey Anderson weren't able to take him down, and Corey Anderson was able to take down Glover Teixeira at will, so take into that what you will, but Jan Blachowicz has a good grappling opportunity here. I just don't think he's going to do it because I'm done predicting fighters to do things that they don't normally do, because when they're under pressure and the lights are on and the super fight is there and Adesanya's in the cage with you, you resort back to doing what you're best and most comfortable at, and I think Blachowicz is going to just stand there and strike with him and lose. But he's a good threat to Adesanya. I don't want to disrespect Jan Blachowicz here because I feel like a lot of people have been doing it recently, but he is number 2 on my list. I think Adesanya gets the job done against him. And now number 1, the UFC champions most likely to lose their belt in 2021. It's Jorge Masvidal on the BMF belt. He's a coward. He doesn't want to fight Colby Covington. It's very, very obvious. He doesn't want to fight any of the tough challenges. He wants that Nate Diaz rematch. He's not a BMF, and I'm joking. The number 1 champion to lose their belt in 2021 is Alexander Volkanovski against Brian Ortega. I can smell it in the air. And I'm a guy I'm not one of these Max Holloway crybaby fans that are just fucking, we don't like the way the fights are scored. It should be changed so that our guy wins rather than scoring them by rounds and clearly seeing that Volkanovski beat Holloway 3 rounds to 2. We can't take it. We don't like the scores. I'm not one of those guys. I'm not going to cry about Holloway losing in a fight that he rightfully should have lost based on the way that we score fights. I'm going to say I'm a big Volkanovski fan. I picked Volkanovski to beat Holloway in that fight. I thought he would win that fight 3-2, and he did, and he's very, very good. However, I think Brian Ortega, there's something about the style that I sense, especially after the Korean Zombie performance. Now, don't get me wrong, I think Korean Zombie after that spinning elbow in the second round or whatever it was a little bit off for the rest of the fight, in all honesty, and I think Brian Ortega just got the respect from the Korean Zombie, and that changed the entire way that the fight looked. But Brian Ortega moving in there against Alexander Volkanovski, I think he's going to pose a lot of problems, because he has something that Max Holloway was kind of missing ever since he moved up to try and take on Dustin Poirier, which is a trust in his chin. And I know that Brian Ortega got TKO'd against Max Holloway, but Ortega's chin is so underrated, and I think he has the youth on his side and the lack of damage that Holloway seems to have racked up over his past few fights to really grit down like Holloway needed to in those Volkanovski fights and take one to give one if it's not going his way. And that was be the old Brian Ortega against Volkanovski. This new Brian Ortega is moving around on the outside, great footwork, great fundamental moves. He used to be a little bit green on the feet and throw things from weird angles and try and catch you with elbows. Now he seems to do all of that plus the fundamental stuff that you need to become a world champion in the UFC. I think Brian Ortega has a real good chance, and not to mention the power difference between him and Max Holloway. I mean, Max Holloway's a bit of a volume guy, and I just don't think you can just volume down Alexander Volkanovski because he's so good with his footwork and he's so good in the first round at chopping down your legs, so you can't physically use that volume on him because you're so beaten down by the time you get to the later rounds where he is a little bit tired. I think Brian Ortega's power, range, and just toughness moving into the fight is going to be a big problem for Alexander Volkanovski. Plus, Brian Ortega's angles as well that he uses. I think against a shorter guy in Volkanovski, some of those uppercuts that we see Brian Ortega throw are going to come in handy here against Volkanovski. I like Volkanovski. I just sense a really bad matchup for him in Brian Ortega. And Holloway just hasn't been able to grit down the same way. After the Dustin Poirier fight where he got rocked really badly, then he came into the Frankie Edgar fight and we didn't see the same Holloway. And I know he said that he wanted to go 5 rounds. It seems like every champion that's expected to TKO someone that ends up going 5 rounds just so happens to want to go 5 rounds at the same time. But it just seemed like in the Edgar fight that he wasn't willing to grit down and go like he was in the other performances. And it was the same story in the Volkanovski fight as well. I think Ortega's going to be able to walk him down, trap him, and land with better consequences than Holloway did. And I think he's going to drop Volkanovski more often as well. Plus, Volkanovski just got dropped twice against Holloway. And before that, he hadn't been dropped in a while since the Chad Mendes fight. So I think Ortega's going to get it done. Still young in his career as well. I know Volkanovski is as well, and he's new to the game of MMA overall, so he's going to learn as well. But I think Brian Ortega being so young and being such a sponge, and you see the difference that he made since his last fight in the Korean Zombie fight, in the style. I think now that we've seen Brian Ortega use that style, he's only going to improve on it the next time around. He doesn't have to change his style again. Like before, he had to take a long time off because he had to sort of reinvent himself. Now he's found a reinvention that works. He just needs to tweak it and add to it and polish things up, and I think he can take out Alexander Volkanovski in 2021, and I think that's my #1 most likely champion to lose their belt in 2021 is Alexander Volkanovski. I will be picking Brian Ortega. Risky as they all are, I'm still going to go with Ortega for #1. He's going to upset Volkanovski in 2021. I wouldn't even be surprised if they're like evens in odds, or Ortega's somehow the favourite because of the betting, because I know people aren't too fond of Volkanovski because he beat Holloway fair and square, but still, great championship fights in 2021. And honourable mentions, Valentina Shevchenko might lose to Jessica Andrade. And that does need to be mentioned in this. It really does, because Jessica Andrade dusted up Caitlin Chookagian so quickly. And Shevchenko had some moments with Chookagian in the first 2 rounds of their fight. So I feel like Andrade is going to be a real problem. Obviously, it's a female division, so the champions will just win anyway. But, you know, anything can happen, right? So we'll see. But yeah, Andrade is a real threat. And also, yeah, I circle back to the BMF Masvidal point. He probably should get that belt taken away from him. Can't be the BMF champion and sit out on the sideline looking for Nate Diaz rematches, mate. Take on the fucking top contenders or shut your mouth. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Click that button up there. Goodbye. See you later.